I think we live. Let's see. Let's see. Listen, come on in here, y'all. Come on in here. Let me see if I'm live. Give my little time a minute to catch up on my phone. Hopefully y'all can hear my music. Hopefully only I can hear my music. Okay. There we go. Okay, there it is, y'all. Yes, hopefully y'all can't. Let me see if I can hear my music on here. Okay, there it is, y'all. Okay, nah, cause see, listen, I don't need no copyright strikes. I don't need anything. Let me turn a little bit so I won't be cut off on this side, so y'all can get into this ponytail. Okay, I need y'all to be able to see this ponytail. Okay, get into it because if you don't follow me on all my other platforms, I let it be known that all summer, that's all I'm doing. Okay, wearing attachable, detachable ponytails. That's it, honey. That's it. Because between it being 1,000 degrees outside and me being 53, so you know what that means, baby. I be hot. Okay, when I tell you hair be sticking on my head, so I can't keep a hairdo. Okay, I'm a natural woman. I can't keep no hairdo. The other years before I turned 50, or even since I turned 50, I was wearing a lot of latch braids. I was wearing a lot of, bohemian braids or braids in the summer. But I noticed that once I hit that 50 mark, baby, my edges start getting a little thin. They start getting real thin. So I couldn't do too much that's going to put too much tension on my head. So I said, you know what? Summer 2026. If I'm going to be out here in these streets, I'm going to be out here with an attachable, detachable ponytail, okay? So this week, I don't know her name, but this is who we got on this week, okay? She's versatile, okay? I wear her everywhere I go, okay? To church, I wore today to church. I wore it to the gym. I wore it to Walmart. I took her out before I went to the pool though. But other than that, baby, she been in the hair all week. I opened her up on Saturday last week, and she been rocking with me all week. Okay, so welcome her to the family. Okay, give her a round of applause down below. All right, and y'all tell me what y'all want to name her. Listen, 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 listen. Welcome, 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 welcome to another Hood Parenting Live. I am your host Yashika, affectionately known as Fairy Godmother. And if this is your first time here, hello. And if this is not your first time here and this is where you've been before, you know me, then honey, welcome back home. And so for you first time subscribers or your first time viewers, I hope by the end of this live you decide that you like this neighborhood, honey, because we are hood parents. So you like this neighborhood. So if you like this neighborhood, I hope that you would just go ahead and pick out you a lot, put you a house in there. I don't care where your lot is at. You can have a whole if you want to. Okay, in the neighborhood, put your house on there as big as your block. I don't care what you do, but go ahead and build it. You do that by pressing the subscribe button and turn on your notifications. So when we have block parties and stuff, right? Like Hood Parenting Live on Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will be the first to know. Okay. And so listen, over here is where we take all those life lessons that we've learned, we connect them, understand how they influence our lives, how they have the impact of our lives, and we use them to be able to make sound decisions in our lives. And so this is what we do here in Hood Parenting, because what I understand is that there's no one way to do things, honey. And I know from my own personal experiences that even if I haven't done the thing, I know somebody else that done it. Okay. So what I know about life is that life throws you patterns that you can repeat, and patterns that you can see. And so because we can see them and once we identify them, then guess what? We can make a difference and change them. Why? Because not all patterns are good patterns. Some things that we were taught when we were young, all those things weren't good for us, right? But we learned them. We had to learn them. We had to endure them. We went through them. Why? Because at that moment, that's what we needed in our lives. But as we get older, we recognize that some of these things are not needed anymore. And so tonight, listen, but before I say that, let me say this. If you've been following me for quite some time, for the last 2 months, I have been doing this series where I call Vlogging Until I Get Monetized. Okay, and in this series, I have been just vlogging my everyday life. And I am so grateful for that journey that I've been on, or this journey that I'm on, because it has really helped me to narrow down what it is, what I need to put out to the world, and what's needed for the world, right? And what I noticed that is a lot of my content, depending on what platform I'm on, the audience dictates something different. But one thing that I do know is consistent is that my audience is growing of women that's in my age group and also women younger than me because on social sites you can get your demographics, especially you can get your demographics, and so I pay attention to that. And so because I monetize on one platform and I'm trying to get monetized on YouTube, and as I'm looking at my demographics, I'm looking at who's watching my videos. And so I'm looking at the demand, and what I recognize is that I tell people, listen, I've lived 7 lives if not 10. All right. I have been married and divorced twice. I have been through every parenting dynamic that you can think of, right? I've been through a lot of, hey, Gwen, how you doing, honey? Good to see you. Happy Sunday, Miss Gwen. I've been through a lot of different family dynamics. And so what I recognize is that these things are what's needed in the world, because what I noticed that people crave more than anything is authenticity, right? Because people are not being honest about who they are, what they've been through. You're noticing, like, when it comes to certain like self-help gurus or people you find online, but when people find people that are consistent in some things, right? They're saying, you know what, this is somebody that I can follow. And so I noticed slowly but surely my people are finding me. And for that, I am grateful. And so it also leads me to know that when I do these hood parenting live on Sundays, that I have to really, really start digging down to the meat and potatoes of it and put some of these fancy degrees and certifications and licensures that I have in place, because some things we got to talk about, honey. And a lot of it, and I'm going to say this before I start on this on this day's topic. A lot of this was fear of what somebody might think. What I do know about when we talk about certain things, sometimes it's hard to differentiate between your experience and you giving an example of something that happened. And so I noticed that a lot of what I talk about, whether it's a life lesson or in conversation or in coaching, I tend to give a lot of personal examples because that's where my lens come from. Although I have all this education and everything, my experience is what I live mostly from. My experience. I don't care what my degrees are in. It's my experience. All my degrees did was give me the ability or certification to say that I'm certified to talk in these areas. But my experience, my lived experience, is where I teach from. And so because of that, I also know that when we teach from things, and it's from my learned experience, sometimes the fallout in which we teach from impacts other people. And so because of that, I tend to be a little bit more careful about what I say, because listen, like I said, I've been through 7 if not 10 lives, but just like I have been through those lives, there have been people who have been with me through those lives as well, right? My closest family members. And so because of that, I try to be careful about what I say, right? But one of the subjects that I wanted to bring up today is, I was thinking about this, and this is one of those things I was like, why do I keep hearing this? But for whatever reason, I kept on hearing the fact that a lot of us have open childhood wounds that we didn't even know we had. And so today, this is the subject that I want to talk about: the open childhood wounds that we did not know we had. And so here's the thing. Before we get into this, I want to say this as a disclaimer, because it's not just my parent, but I notice that I do it as a parent, and I notice that other parents do things. When a child, regardless of the age of that child, talks about things that happen in their upbringing, in their childhood, in their whatever, it does not discredit. All of those things doesn't discredit the positive things. In other words, for example, say that my son talks about, Mom, you was never home because I was a soldier, right? So he may say, well, Mama, you was gone all the time. That's a true statement. But instead of me telling him, well, had I not been gone, you wouldn't have these things. So in other words, both things can be true at the same time. But somehow we will receive that as a parent, that when a child says something, that it's a personal attack on what we did as a parent to make sure that child had what they needed. And so as a disclaimer, this is not that. We have to understand that many things can be true at the same time. And when we realize that many things can be true at the same time, then we can understand that everybody lived different lives regardless. Because listen, you could tell, I was talking to someone about this the other day. You can have an incident that occurred, and 5 people are summoned to go to court to talk about that incident, every person will have a different story. They could have been standing in a line next to one another where they were locked in arms. They all still will give an account of that story differently. Whether it is the way that the person was driving, or the way that the color clothes they had on, or how tall that person might have been, or whether they're describing that person's skin tone or complexion, or whatever the case, everybody will have a different story about what happened. And so when we talk about events that happen in your life, or when we discuss those things, or when it's talked about, we got to understand that that is that person's experience from where they were, their lens. And so it's not to attack anybody, because again, many things can be true at one time. And so that's my disclaimer. All right. But what I do know is that a lot of things that we learned has taught us also that some wounds that we bleed from can't be seen by others, right? Some wounds are internal. Some wounds are internal, right? Because whether it was you always had to be the strong one, you always had to be the one that you were strong one, so you didn't ask the people for help, right? Or you was the one that felt like you had to earn love instead of simply receiving love. That might have been something that you experienced that you didn't even know. Like when we think about the things that we went through and we said, well, you know what? I didn't even know. We're going to unpack those things tonight. So the first thing I want to talk about, and listen, I have my whole studio set up because when I was making my notes, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything, okay? Because listen, y'all know I'm 53, okay? I've been a mess around here and have a train of thought and been and lost it, and there it goes. It's been flirted off somewhere else, okay? It's been and went somewhere else, and I didn't forgot what I was talking about. And y'all know listen, it's just me, okay? I do all the production around this piece, okay? So I can't ask nobody what subject was I talking about, where was I at? Okay, so I got to depend on this note. So I got notes everywhere, all right? So number one's talking point, okay? Number one's talking point. One of the hardest things to admit as adults is that sometimes what we see as normal can be also harmful to us, okay? Can be also harmful to us. And a lot of times we'll put it off as saying things like, well, that's just the way we were, or everybody did that, or we didn't talk about our feelings back then, or parents did the best they could. Like those were the ways that we handle things. And let me tell you something. We put excuses on. In other words, we normalize these wounds. And how I really thought about this, my sibling and I have one baby brother, and I were having a conversation the other day. Again, a related story. And we were talking about, I don't know how we got on the subject. We were talking about, affection as a child, right? How much affection that was shown as a child. Now, my mother tells me the story that when she gave birth to me when she was 16 in 73, that she still lived at home with her parents. And so because she still lived at home with her parents, there was just certain things that her mother would tell her not to do. And one of those things was picking me up excessively. Back then they say you pick a baby up too much, they would spoil them. You spoil them. So my grandmother would more or less tell my mom that. And so my mother she felt like that she couldn't get that connection with me because she felt like her mother was overseeing her in terms of what kind of parent she was, because she was only 16. Well, fast forward, when she had my brother at 18, she had her own spot by that time, or shortly after. And so because of that, she was able to hug and kiss all over him the way that she desired without my grandmother interfering. And so because of that, she tells me that she believed that's why when it came to our relationship, in terms of the hugging and kissing part, that it wasn't the same, or it was never that. Because I tell her the story how, in terms of saying I love you and things like that, I didn't even know, for me, it was never something that was said. However, when I joined the Army, back in the 90s, I joined the Army in 91. And y'all know before the era of cell phones, we had phone booths. And so in basic training or wherever in the Army post, you'll see a whole bunch of phone booths that would be lined up next to each other. And so I would hear other girls on the phone because, basic training is all females when back then. And I would hear other girls on the phone with their parents. And when they get off the phone, they would say, I love you. And so even the ones that spoke Spanish would tell them in Te amo, they would say it in Spanish. And so it was one of those things where I was like, I think I'm supposed to tell my mom this too. So one day I was like, hey, I love you. So she said it back. And so I was like, okay, I think this is what we're supposed to do, And so it kind of became that thing, right? And so my brother and I were having this conversation about it. He said, well, Yashika, when did mama really hug and kiss on me? Because he was trying to tell me that she didn't really do it to him because for me, I didn't really recognize the importance of, affection until after I had my oldest son. And I was 22 when I had him, and I had been married to my husband for 4 years. However, even with my husband, I didn't learn it. It was after my husband and I separated and we were pending divorce, and I was in a situationship with someone else where they taught me something different that I didn't know that I enjoyed. And it's because this person he was very, very touchy feely. And so with that, and by that time my son was about a year old, a little bit over. And so for me, I had already been going through that stage of kissing and hugging all over him. And so for me, I just learned that, hey, I like this overall. And I didn't know it. And so my brother and I were discussing that. And he was saying, well, it was like mama just didn't do it because she come from a family of 12. So her parents didn't do it to her. And I tried to explain to him, just because it wasn't done, that doesn't mean that I did not miss it or I did not want it. And I wish I had had it. So that when I did become an adult, I didn't have this issue with people in the beginning when I first became an adult, because I didn't understand what it meant to really. And so that's one of those things where that was a wound that we normalize. In other words, it was, well, that's just the way it was. That's just no, here's the thing. And I'm not saying that all parents need to do this or all parents need to adjust. All I'm saying is what Yashika desired as a child versus we've normalized that wound as being okay. In other words, well, I didn't get a lot of hugs either, so you should just suck it up. No, it's not okay. I wanted a lot of hugs. And I needed to be said that I wanted a lot of hugs. Like I needed that to be known. And so those are one of the things that we normalize because feel that, if we talk about it, then it's going to create some type of animosity or you're going to create violence with somebody else. No, these things are important. Why? Because I'm a Pisces, honey. What can I say? I'm a Pisces. Okay. Y'all know we fall in love with everybody. Okay, we fall in love with everybody and we love everybody. Okay, and so because we love everybody, I didn't know what to do with them feelings as a young girl because I was like, oh, I feel these feelings, but I don't think I'm supposed to because I didn't see it. I didn't know what was going on. Okay, so honey, it was a whole thing, baby. By the time I got out there, I was a Pisces. Okay, so I loved everybody. Okay, I been in love at 8 years old. I loved him. I loved it to him at 8 years old. Okay, at 8 years old, I loved it at him. Okay, that's me. Okay, but anyway, we're gonna keep on. So when you think about it, tell me down below, what are some things that you felt that you normalized or you from an upbringing where it was normalized, and when you became an adult, you realized that that was a wound that was being normalized and it shouldn't have been. Tell me down below because I know there's a lot of things that that people know for sure that they carry with them and they didn't realize it, right? My second point that I want to talk about this when we talk about open childhood wounds that we didn't know we have is sometimes these wounds will show up in relationships. Gwen, family secrets is a big one, baby. When I tell you, baby, family secrets, you know what? I'm gonna do a live on that one day, family secrets, because and I think I talked about this before about a secret that I told at my grandmother's funeral to somebody, and there were some family members that did not like that, but it was one of those things that yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's one of them. And so what I know about family secrets is that it will cause more harm than anything else. And that's it. And we'll talk about that later. But thank you for sharing that. But wounds sometimes show up in relationships, right? So because they don't always stay in your childhood, they show up when you get married. They show up in friendships. They show up in all kind of things, right? I know one of the things that I think for me, is I had that whole, well, you're not gonna hurt me. Like when it came to my divorces, right? I remember being the one that was like, you know what? Let me divorce him before he divorced me. Okay, because in my mind, I had already dealt with abandonment issues from my father, but of course, I didn't know what it was called, right? And so, but I knew as a young girl that, well, hold up, this man just made a decision not to be here, because if you follow me long enough, I tell people that I met my father the first time when I was 12. I seen him again. I want to say either when I was 16 and 18 or just 18. I can't remember. It's blurry in there if I seen him at 16. However, when I was 20, I buried him. And so, because he passed away in a car crash. And so, matter of fact, July 17th was would have been his 74th birthday. And so I acknowledged him on that day. And so anyway, when I started to date men, when I started to get older, that was definitely one of those things where I had to put up this, like, I'm not gonna, because here's the thing, people got the right to do whatever they want to do at any given time. So in my mind, I am not going to let you hurt me first. Like, in other words, you may do some things that's going to hurt me, but I'm only going to let you do it so much, and then I'm out. I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna cry because I already know what it feels like to be abandoned. And so if I see that you're doing things to hurt me, because in my mind, my dad would do things to hurt me, right? He would call and say, I'm coming to see you, or I'm gonna send this, and he wouldn't do it. And so for me, I looked at men like, okay, well, if he can renege on what he said he was gonna do, clearly you will renege on what you say you gonna do. I mean, it wasn't just him, it was people in general, right? But I specifically felt that way about men. And so I knew for a fact that this was a wound that showed up in my relationships. And so I don't know if I even recognized it in any of my marriages, but I did know that when I felt like I was in a position where I don't know that I don't know. I felt like it was best for me to get out first. And I don't know how else to put it, but I know that that was also a wound, because in my mind, you can't hurt me and say you love me, right? Because that's how I felt with my father. You can't say you hurt me, you love me, but then hurt me, right? Because to me, those two can't live in the same sentence, but they can, right? And so in a relationship, that was something that I took over with me from my father, because in my mind, how can you love me and you hurt me? But then the same thing with when I was in relationships, right? And so I had to understand that people are people. And although these things over here happen, listen, it has nothing to do with anything. Why? Because it doesn't negate two things can be true at one time, just like I said at the beginning of this, right? And although we want to, put it into this, there's no way this person can love me or care about me if they do these things. People are people. And so because people are going to more or less respond in a selfish way first, in a way that's going to please them. And regardless, because they don't do things in an intent to hurt you, they do things in an intent to, I'm not saying everybody, I ain't saying that ain't no 1 or 2% of people that do intentional hurt things. But for the most part, people do not do things intentionally to hurt someone else. They do things intentionally to satisfy their own needs. That's why people do things. It's not about hurting other people. It is to satisfy their own needs. And so because of that, in the meantime, other people get hurt. Because again, two things can live in one position at the same time. Two things can live in one circumstance at the same time. Right. And so we have to be aware that do wounds show up in our relationship? Because if they do, then we have to acknowledge these things. Okay. And that goes to my third talking point. Recognition does not mean repairing instantly. In other words, if you know that these things are affecting your life, then you have to say, okay, is this who I am because this is who I am, or if this is who I am because this is how I had to be? Like I said earlier, I met my father one time in life, but my father gave me one piece of advice that has changed my life. And here's the thing, I don't even know if it changed, but what I know at 53, I still hold on to it. When I met him at 12 years old, this is what he told me. And I got to tell you guys a story to understand. So at 12 years old, I was moving fast. Okay, understand that I was moving fast. If you know what that means, then I was moving fast. Okay, I was moving fast. All right, and so I guess apparently I was hugged and kissed up with one of my little boyfriends. Okay, and by me being a fair-skinned woman, he put what they call a passion mark, a hickey mark, whatever it is, on my neck. Now, this happened right when my father came to town for the first time. Okay, first time I had ever seen my father since I was born, or when I was one, I don't know, something like that. And so my mother, I was able to tell her if something else happened, and she didn't ask no more questions. So I was just like, I was scratching and it happened and whatever. My father, although this was the first time I had met him, he didn't fall for it as easily. Okay, he didn't fall. He was a hustler. He was a hustler. He was a hustler. That was what his job was. He was a hustler. Okay, so he knew the streets. He knew the game. The whole 9 yards. He looked at me. He said, "Listen, don't ever let anyone make you change who you are." That's what he said to me. And so that right there was one of those things that when I tell you has kept me together from the age of 12 until now and beyond, and it will always, because when I find myself in positions, right, where I'm like, okay, is this who I really am? Like, am I acting this way because of this? And here's the thing, I can't blame anybody else because of the way I react to a situation. In other words, if I react to, let's say, a man go out there and my husband go out there and do something, right? If I react by going and do something, that's because I wanted to. I can't blame him for it. However, I have to understand, why is it that I'm doing this? There was something in me that wanted to retaliate. There was something in me that felt like I had to get my lick back, whatever the case may be. And so just because we recognize that we have things, we don't do anything until we actually work to repair it. And the way you repair it is, first of all, you got to distinguish, is this me? Or is this me carrying these things, these wounds with me, these childhood open wounds that I did not know I had? Because if you are in a position where you are carrying them and you know you're carrying them and they're not serving you, what I do know is that you will repeat the same lessons over and over again until you do something different. That's what I do know, right? You will repeat the lessons. And so so I see people, like sometimes I'll look at people, and because I talked about relationships, that's the best way to really, really, because people have an understanding when we talk about relationships, marriages, and things like that. It's like a mutual understanding, right? So when we talk about relationships with a partner, right? That's when, so it's easier to talk about that. So when I talk about, when we talk about two different ways of living, I lost my train of thought just that quick. See how that go? See how that go? I lost my train of thought just that quick. But what I was going to say is, when we talk about the things that we do in relationships, okay, when a partner hurts us or do something, how will you respond to that? Right? Do you respond because this is the way you are, or do you respond because this is the way you have to be? And we have to know the difference, right? Because as adults, we have to choose how we go about things. We can't choose necessarily what happens to us, but we have to be able to say, okay, how do I respond to this thing? Because we understand now as adults that there are reactions. There are reactions to our actions. There are things that when we do things one time, right? You do one. It's not like you can say, okay, well, I didn't know. When you get a certain age, you can't keep saying I didn't know about things that you keep repeating. And so what I was going to say about relationships, when people are in relationships, you ever notice that you'll see people in relationships, like they'll get out of one relationship and then in a relationship again. That's what I was going to say when I was talking about relationships tend to be mutual when we talk about a partner, right? When my thoughts went out the window, cuckoo. But anyway, you ever notice that when people are in relationships, they'll end the relationship and then they'll get back in another one. And then they'll get out of that relationship and then they'll get back in another one, right? It's almost like, okay, what is that person learning during that stage of being single? Because sometimes people aren't even single long enough to really understand what happened in that first relationship or that relationship before they jump into another relationship. Because a lot of times people have this old saying, why? Because of things that we believe that one way to get over one person is to get with another person, under, above, between, whatever, another person, right? When in actuality, sometimes we have to sit with ourselves to understand, is this who I am? Or is this who I had to be to survive in order to get to who I am right now? Because like I said, in hood parenting, this is what this is about. The things that we did as young kids or as young folk, right? It helped. How do those things help us to advance? We don't repeat those same mistakes. We say, okay, we acknowledge those, we pivot. Why? Because we don't want to pass those things over to our kids, continuously passing down generational traits, open wounds, and like Gwen said earlier, family secrets, things like that that hurt us trauma. Because that's what we do when Lord knows we do that. When we are not facing our wounds and we're literally raising children, it comes out in our children. It distributes to our children, whether we intend to or not. It happens. I see it in my own life, whether it's me, because remember, as I go on this journey, a lot of the baby boomers, they didn't plan for retirement. And so as I'm pushing my kids along, because that's what I'm doing, I'm pushing my children along, I have to pull my mother with me, because again, they didn't prepare for retirement. And so it's me in the middle of trying to make sure that everybody is good. And so it's this tug and this tug and this tug, right? It's this tug and this tug, right? And so when I think about where we are, we're going to keep doing these same old things until we do something different. So what wounds are we carrying? When I look at my family, right? I go home. Whenever I go home, there are so many things I see. And I was telling somebody about this the other day. And I think this is where I started to get a little personal about, my journey and things. And I think that that's why I kind of stay away from subjects sometimes. One thing about it is I think that when I served in the military, it didn't give me the flexibility to be at home and really see what was going on, because I knew that that was just a temporary moment in time when I would go back to my hometown, right? That when I was home for that week leave or however long I was at home, I knew that that was a temporary moment, and that it could be another year or so before I come back again, and this whole dynamic been changed, right? So I didn't really look into it much. I didn't really pay attention. Although I saw stuff, I didn't really pay attention to it because why? I had other things to worry about. I was living life. I was trying to figure life out. Okay. Now that I'm retired, it's like it looks different to me when I go back home. And what I mean by that is I see the constant generational things that are being repeated. Right. I'm blessed enough to have been able to see my mother's generation, my grandmother's generation, and actually met my great grandmother. So that was three generations prior to me. And right now, I believe that there are four generations up under me, if I'm not mistaken. My kids, my kids, and I think the kids up under them had kids already, either three or four. So it's like 7 or 8 generations that I've been lucky enough to see, that I've been blessed enough to see. But what I notice is that there are a lot of things that still continuing on. Although there's 7 generations of life that I've seen, there's still a lot of things that's continuing on. Why? Because people are still denying that these things are true, that these things are here, that these things are affecting our growth, that these things are things that we need to talk about, because somehow they feel that when we talk about these wounds, these childhood wounds, that it negates anything that anybody has done, regardless. Right? Like I could recall times of my own life where my son saying to me, I'm looking at him like, "How dare you? Not what I didn't just been through for you to have that." Right? And no, I had to acknowledge that this is how he feels, regardless of what I've been through, because he didn't ask me to do this thing that I did for him. Because this thing ain't just for him, it's for me too. So we gotta stop playing about that. I did all this for you. No, it's for me too. I want to eat good too. Okay, I want to eat good too. So when we acknowledge that, it's one of those things that I'm like, okay, these things he felt that way. I can't take them back, and I can't justify why I did them. All I can tell him is that I'm sorry these things happened. All I can tell you is what was going on from my viewpoint. So maybe you can have an understanding. But it doesn't change the fact that why, as a soldier, I was gone more than I was home. That is a fact. I don't care why I was gone. I don't care if my job did demand it. That is a fact. And so sometimes when we hear people say things, we feel like it's a direct attack on us. When no, these are things that happen. Why? Because these are wounds that if we don't address, a person feeling this kind of way. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes people will feel a certain kind of way. You have to entertain people, okay? You got to know your kids. You got to know your folks. You got to know your partner. You got to know whoever. All right. But for the most part, open wounds or wounds that come from childhood exist. And we have to understand that until we do something different with these things, that they're going to, and that two things can't exist at one time. And so, listen, I know that a lot of experiences that I've been through in life are experiences that other people have experienced, or they can see light at the end of the tunnel. Give an example. I did a project a year and a half ago where I hired a crew. And of course, the project that I did, I had no idea that one of the crew members will reach back out to me and confide in me how that particular project that I hired them for was actually what was going on in their life at the time. And they had no idea that what was being displayed was like them in the future. Like they had no idea, and they were so grateful that they was able to see it. Like, okay, well, all right, this it's gonna be all right, right? Whatever we were doing, whatever I was doing, whatever project I was working on, it was something that that person can see themselves in the future. And so it's one of those things where, you know what, that's what I mean when I say sometimes, even if you don't experience certain things, you see other people going through it, because sometimes God put those people in your path so you can see. So you don't have to go through all the bad to understand that, listen, do things differently. When we do things differently, there's a different outcome. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be a better outcome. It's not always, right? A chessboard, you move one piece, is not the same board no more. I don't care what you do. You move one piece, is not the same board anymore. But you got to move a piece. in order to see who gonna win. You gotta move a piece if you're trying to get to the other side. You got to. You gotta make a move. You just can't stand still. Right. And so one of the ways we do that by moving pieces is that we look at what our ancestors been through. We look at what other people have been through that we know that, listen, I want to either do this like they did it, or I want to do it differently than the way they did it. And this is how we go through these life. We recognize patterns. We recognize how the things in our childhood connects to us right now, and how it shapes us, how it molds us, how it gives us our power. Right? Because we've seen these things. Like I tell people all the time, my life in the streets of Detroit, listen, I did everything. You name it, I did. Listen, you name it, I did it. In terms of making money. Okay, you name it, I did it. Okay. Now, with that being said, I still went to one of the best schools in the country. I mean, I was all the things. Okay. I was all the things. Okay. But what I also knew that if I didn't get up out of there, that would be my life. Okay. So what I'm saying is that I knew that also that life helped prepare me for anything that I need to do in this world. I don't care what it was. So I knew the army wasn't going to be nothing for me, because I came from a beating. Oh, listen, mama whooped my behind. Listen, she didn't believe in sparing a rod, spoiling the child, baby. So when it came to the army and I went to the military, and my mother, they used to call her Miss Jack Foster. I didn't understand why, because they said she cussed like, because she would curse a lot. And so they call her Miss Jack Foster because she would curse, because she didn't fight, but she would slick with her words. She still is to this day, okay? She real slick with her words, okay? So that was one of the things where she would, she would just, That's funny every time I think about that. So anyway, listen, I don't know who this is for, but I know that these stories that I tell, they're going to help somebody, because we get to look at our lives and say, you know what? I want to do something different. I know that these things over here prepared me for this over here. Like I was saying about the whole my mother cussing. Listen, I knew I could make it in the military. I knew that there was nothing that they could say to me that would break me, because the things that I had heard my life, the things that I had experienced other people going through, whether it was personal or whether it was indirect or whatever. I have heard some words, and I have seen people use some words, and I have seen people use things physical. So I knew they couldn't put their hands on me. So all they had was their words. So I knew I could make it. And so we have to recognize that there's things in our lives that we do that prepares us for future lives. But we have to learn from those experiences. We have to use them as stepping stones. And this is what hood parenting is about. Okay. And so this is for my future great grandchildren. Okay. That I won't meet. All right. I'm 50 years old, 53, and I don't have any grandkids at all. So when I do these is for the children of the world and the children, my great grandchildren, so that I can tell them, listen, we get to do anything we want to do in this world. Why? Because we've paid prices. Every time I tell people this, and let me say this before I go. Every time one of my elders pass away in my family, I feel that I gain strength. And the reason why I gain strength is because I remember what that person taught me, because I learned something from everybody that I meet in this life. And so for me, I gain strength from that person, and I'm able to tell the things, or that one thing, or I'm able to understand, I remember this about that person. And so it makes me stronger. Right. And then I tell somebody else about it. So that's how we do it. That means that those people are never forgotten. And it's the secrets of the ancestors that make our lives better. The things that they go through, so we don't have to go through those things. And so when I say I make these videos and all this for my great grandchildren, because I know that I probably won't see them. And so because of that, I need them to know, listen, there's more than one way to get it out here, honey. You get to create this life, and don't let anybody tell you anything different. But we have to recognize that there are things that we need to let go of, right? Because they don't serve us, especially the childhood wounds that are still open. And so listen, if this is your first time here, I hope that I have given you something to be inspired to make you buy some property, or should I say, nope, not buy. My property around here is free. To go ahead and make you sign a lease and hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications, so when I do another live, which I go live on Sundays, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, unless I got something going on, honey. If I got something going on, I'm not going to be live. But I have a schedule now in which I drop videos Wednesdays and Saturdays now is when I drop videos, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well. And so listen, I am almost I'm almost there, y'all. I'm almost there. So let's keep this train rolling. Listen, I enjoy this and I hope you learned something from this. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now. Bye. Thank you, Gwen.